It's a challenge that lays in front of you, Bob, as you look ahead and maybe even look back a little bit.
Yeah, we don't want to do too much looking back. It obviously has been a very frustrating first year in MLS. There's lots of things that have gone well, and from a business perspective, the fact that we had 20,000 plus people on a regular basis and third average attendance in the league. From a personnel perspective, I think it's not necessarily important what I think, it's important what Martin thinks, but having discussed the squad with him and from what he's seen, there is a good core of players that we have to build around. And then it'll be a question of actually filling in the spots that we think need bolstering. But this mini camp now will give him a chance to interact with players. I'm not so sure that it's going to be that important from a technical perspective. He's got a pretty good idea of what most of the guys are all about. I think for him it's going to be an opportunity to get to know the people and sit down with guys on a one-on-one basis and find out a little bit more about what makes them tick.
I got to ask you to look back a little bit for me, though. I mean, how disappointed are you, or what more did you expect from a win standpoint more than anything last year? Because you got off to that great start.
Yeah, we did. I mean, there's been a lot said about our aspirations to be a top 25 club, and I think we actually put ourselves under more pressure than we needed to by perhaps looking too far ahead, and that is a vision of ours, but it's not one I think that we want to be talking about right now when we're in the midst of trying to correct the season that we've just had. I'm extremely disappointed. We're all extremely disappointed about the fact that we didn't get the results that we would have liked to have had. Having said that, I think I'd be more disappointed if there were no people in the stands and we didn't have the quality of sponsors that we have. In fact, if it's going to be one way or the other, it's better that we had a poor season but have the base of support that we have, because you can build on that. If we're doing well on the field and nobody cares, that's a whole other problem. So we'll get the playing side right. It was a frustrating year, and I think everyone in the club has to take some accountability, and I can say from ownership right on down to the kit guys, we've all made mistakes in our first year, but now it's a question of looking back and trying to make sure that we don't make those same mistakes again.
What did you learn, Bob, last year? Maybe some things on or off the field that surprised you didn't know were even coming?
Yeah, I think the thing that I learned and we learned is that in fact it's a much better league from the quality of play perspective than I think we had anticipated. The feeling was if you added a few players to the roster you had in USL that you'd come up and you'd be competitive. We did add a number of players, and some of our problems were created ourselves, but others it was really a question of coming up against teams on a week-to-week basis that were of a high quality, and I think that's great, because what it illustrates is that the league is a much better league than I think a lot of people tend to give it credit for.
Well, you do have a very loyal fan base and sponsors, like you mentioned, but do you sense that there's kind of a pressure now to start winning more next season to make sure they stick with you?
I think we had a one-year grace period as an expansion franchise, and I think it's important that we are competitive next year. I think we need to learn from our mistakes, and I'll start now by not promising anything. I think what we can promise is that we're going to try and analyze what went on and make sure that next year we're in the hunt for a playoff spot right up until the final game of the season, and that is something that is certainly an achievable objective, and one that we may not get to, but what we want to see is a significant improvement from the point of view of performance on the field.
Next step, Bob, new coach?
Next step is to let him have a week now, or a week to 10 days to familiarize himself with the players that we have available, and then start to work on making sure that the guys that we're going to have back are feeling excited about the challenge ahead, and then really spending in between now and pre-season filling in the holes that we think we need to fill in to make us much more competitive.
Bob, we know you guys were very successful at the box office, and you had the tremendous fan support. How How would you describe the product on the field from start to finish as a whole going forward?
I would suggest that at the very least, I think there may have been, there was one game in particular, a home game that I was finding difficult to watch. But I think for the most part, the home games, we had a pretty good home record. I think we were at 500. And for the most part, they were entertaining. And so that part of it, I'm not too concerned about. And the one game that I am referring to actually was the opening game at BC Place. I thought we absolutely, for whatever reason, just didn't turn up in that game and were well beaten by Portland. The other obvious problem that we had is we couldn't get results on the road. And I think once we got towards the end of the season and that we kept being reminded of that, I'm a big advocate that when you are in a losing skid, that you'll find ways to lose. And conversely, when you start winning, you'll find ways to win. And I think we were in a massive funk. And the one thing that I don't think we ever did was quit. I think, and for me, that's something that quite often is thrown out there. Well, the team's not, they're going through the motions. I don't think that's the case. I think it's more a question of just the losing starts to wear on you. And if you look at the history of our club, the fact that prior to this past season, I think it was 5 seasons out of the 37 that we hadn't made the playoffs, and so we have a history of winning, and so this season was tough to take for everyone.
Martin talked about the need to get to know players better, get to know them, maybe family, and maybe what's holding them back. How important is it to have a players coach where players are comfortable in talking about that too and approaching him with that?
Very important, and a lot of people assume that the coach's role, and it are the X's and O's and the tactics and who plays where, and that is important. But for me, the players that you either inherit or you bring in are of a certain ability, and it's more about man management of players than it is about organizing them when they go onto the field. So the fact that Martin is prepared to spend the time on that side of it, I think, is very critical.
How is he as a person? I mean, do you feel comfortable?
Very, very comfortable. Yeah, he's and then the interesting thing for me is when you're actually talking to him away from the cameras and the fans, is that he's a very serious individual, but he actually turns it on when he's in front of the cameras, and I see a different side to him. And I saw a different side to him just yesterday afternoon. We had a meeting of all the support staff at the club, and he opened up the session and was very authoritative, was very to the point, and the key message was we've got to change the culture in this club, and the culture needs to be one of, we want to look back on last year but not dwell on it. We want to look ahead, and we want to correct the things that we did wrong, and we want to establish that people coming in here all understand that nothing short of good performances is going to be accepted. And you may have a good performance and you may lose a game. That's a different story to me. But losing a game as a result of not being focused or mailing it in, that's unacceptable.
Does the club have any set pre-season plans yet?
We don't, but we're in the midst of confirming those now, and we'll spend a lot of time away from Vancouver, primarily because of the weather at that time of the year. So we have a couple of trips that are probably 10 days to 2 weeks.
Don't enjoy the Vancouver rain?
No, we will be enjoying some of that, yeah, but no, it would be nice to get, and I mean, the important part of preseason, and one of the things that MLS does well is clubs do congregate in one area, so you've got 4 or 5 teams in a spot, so it's good that you can get your preseason games in under conditions that are controlled by the coaches.
Do you have any preference as to how the league's going to look next year, with whether it's like all regional or whether there's more kind of cross-conference games?
I don't necessarily. What I do understand is the difficulty of a full schedule where everyone plays everyone home and away. We're getting up to too many games, and with all the competitions that are being played, if you're a successful club, ultimately you're going to be penalized for being successful. So I think the league needs to look at how they're going to be able to hold firm on the number of games and make sure that we're not, playing a team too many times. It may be that there's an additional game required against a regional rival, and people have their concerns, and other people have their delight with the fact that could happen on a regular basis. But I actually think it's going to come down to trying to make sure that we're not spending a lot of our time on planes and exhausting players to the point where we're not seeing the best performances.
Probably Tommy's moving back into his director of soccer operations role.
Yeah.
Martin's going to come in and want to have the reins. How do you see that relationship going, and what the importance of that dynamic?
Same as last year. Ultimately, our coach, whoever is our coach, has the ultimate say on who the player is. Whoever the director of soccer operations is, and it is Tommy, he'll go out and he'll know what kind of player he's looking for, but ultimately the head coach always has the final say.
Women's coach hiring? Where are we at in that process?
Still going through the process, yeah.
Shortlist yet?
Not yet.
Is there a timeline for that?
Ideally as soon as possible in terms of recruiting players, but that's something that actually Danny, my brother, is working on right now.
The importance of having some stability in that position?
On the women's side,
I mean, 4 and 5 years.
no question. It would be nice to get someone in that is we plan and they plan to be around for a while. So yeah, that would be one of the objectives.
Okay.